This is where fact and fable merge. Luxor in Egypt. One of the most treasured legacies of ancient history. Thousands of years ago, granite blocks were transported down the Nile to this temple at Luxor to create these breathtaking monuments, a feat of architecture still unfathomable to many today. And then nearby are the world-renowned burial chambers of generations of ancient Egyptian royalty.
This is the Valley of the Kings, a huge underground necropolis about 8 miles from modern Luxor. It's where the archaeologist Howard Carter spent 5 tough years on his version of the gold rush. And then he struck lucky, just here.
And what a discovery it was. In 1922, Howard Carter stumbled on a set of steps and into the tomb of a 19-year-old king who'd been forgotten by history. The tomb itself doesn't compare to others in Luxor, which are much larger and intricately painted. But it had one major advantage. It was the most intact in terms of its treasures.
This is the only tomb we found it complete, or Howard Carter found it complete. The other is robbed. And so many people, they came usually to visit the tomb, especially whom they visited Cairo Museum and saw the stuff of King Tut over there, so they would like to come to see the tomb itself.
And hence Tutankhamun became perhaps the most famous pharaoh of all. But time has taken its toll, and there's a problem.
For more than 3,000 years, this tomb survived intact, in almost pristine condition. But after only 9 decades of tourism, with up to 1,000 visitors trooping in here every day, well, the conditions deteriorated dramatically. And the main reason for that was this: human breath.
What you see in Tutankhamun is a highly cracked surface that's moving away from the bedrock. Now the presence of the visitors that change the temperature and the humidity in the tomb on a daily basis, mixed with the fact that the walls can no longer breathe, means it's expanding and contracting, and it's being pushed off the wall by the build-up of salt crystals behind it. So here you have now a disastrous series of conditions which have to be stabilized.
There are some people, they touch the walls, so it's not so good. And sometimes the people whom they have half sleeves, so sometimes from the body itself, from the skin itself, so it's not so good for and the antiquities generally.
Okay.
It's not only Tutankhamun.
And the damage has been compounded by previous disastrous attempts at conservation. A radical solution was needed. A specialist company based in Madrid was commissioned in 2009 by Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities to first document and then replicate Tutankhamun's tomb. It was a complex job lasting 5 weeks, with 3D scanners taking into account colour, tone, texture, relief, sheen and quality. For every square metre, 100 million individual bits of data were recorded.
We want every deviation, every crack, every element of the character of the surface. With that amount of data, we can process, study, and rematerialize the surface so it's visually identical at normal viewing distances to the original.
The makers of the replica claim that their facsimile actually includes a bit that's missing from this, the original, which makes it more original than the original. Get your head around that one.
But revolution and unrest in Cairo have thrown plans into confusion. and the consequent drop in tourism visitors to Luxor has meant the original tomb is still open to the public. In spite of the availability of the replica, which was delivered to Cairo in November, there's still no agreement among the big players as to when it can be introduced. As to where, however, well, there's a very likely contender.
There is a general agreement about the need to put it somewhere in Luxor, but now the suitable place will be Howard Carter residence, and the space there is perfect.
The frustration is that the longer the tomb is exposed to the heavy levels of humidity and temperature changes, the more it's at risk. We don't want the tomb to be closed because there's a collapse. We would much rather the tomb was closed with public consensus.
What we're talking about here is a change in mindset in tourists, a recognition that in the grand scheme of things, going to see the facsimile, the replica, rather than the real thing, is actually a positive act in itself.
There are precedents for this. In southwest France, for instance, the caves of Lascaux had to be closed as the surfaces were becoming mouldy. In 1983, a replica, Lascaux II, was opened, and that same fake is still visited today by 250,000 people a year. But it's not so easy to convince these people, though, of why a replica is a good idea.
We need to have that passion to see the real thing. If you're seeing a replica, you don't have that same passion.
It's amazing to see the original work there and to think it is 2,000–3,000 years old. I might not have the same effect. I'm of mixed mind because I would hate to see them destroyed anymore.
I would not want to come all the way from Canada to see replicas in Egypt. The idea of having those glass panels to save the originals as you're going through is a really good idea, and I think that that's probably what they should do.
Glass doesn't do anything to prevent the changes of temperature or changes of humidity. All it does is get dusty. Putting in advanced lighting systems, putting in powered conditioning systems, well, of course it helps, but it's not the long-term solution. It's a short-term fix.
Cynics say that this will become the Valley of the Replicas rather than the Valley of the Kings, which seems a bit cruel, but in a way the people who've got most to lose are the people who make their living here, the vendors and the guides.
It will be very negative for tourism because I'm sure that every country could have replicas for other tombs back home where they are from, have one in Japan and one in America, and tourists don't need to come anymore to see the tombs, and this is the Valley of the Kings especially is one of the highlights, one of the main reasons that people come here to Egypt to see the tombs.
And in these uncertain times for Egyptian tourism, it appears now the favoured transitional solution is to have both the original and the replica available to the public at the same time. But that would mean the public forking out more for the real deal.
If they would like to visit the original tomb, they have to pay a lot of money. This is very good for the tomb itself, and also it's good for the Egyptian income.
For people here who believe it's essential to introduce replicas, this isn't just about preserving ancient history. To paraphrase the former chief archaeologist of this country, as long as Egypt's antiquities are safe, then so is Egypt.